Hey everybody, this is Dr. Maples. Today we're going to continue our series on publishing undergraduate research by talking about writing a literature review. Now I know writing literature reviews can be one of the more daunting parts of any research paper, but I'm here to tell you at the undergraduate level, there's a simple, straightforward way that you can write a literature review that's going to wow your professors and also make your paper very publishable. And I'm going to teach you how to do that today. We got a lot to do today, so let's get started. Now, before we begin, if you'd be willing to share this video or any of my videos on social media, that would be a huge help to me. My whole purpose in having this channel is to help other students have an easier experience in college than I did, and you sharing those videos helps me make that mission possible. Now, literature reviews are really exciting because they take all these really cool articles and things that other people have said about your topic, and they really summarize it in a couple of paragraphs. In fact, at the undergraduate level, your literature review really only needs to be a couple of paragraphs, and each of those paragraphs is going to serve a specific purpose of talking about a particular theme in the articles that are out there on your topic. We need to identify those themes first, and the easiest place to do that is to actually look at your research question. Your research question is going to phrase some very clear ideas that we know we're going to want to talk about. Now for this video, let's use an example research question that explores how is it that education might correlate with changes in poverty in a community. Now, right away, we could probably see some really clear topics that we're going to talk about. We definitely want to talk about education and communities. And we also want to talk about how poverty impacts communities. These are some straightforward ideas that are going to pop up in our literature review. In fact, we should start making a list of these ideas. On a piece of scratch paper somewhere, start putting some themes. Education, poverty. Maybe we'll find some papers talking about education and poverty together, how these two are already linked. We can also look at our hypotheses to see if there's other specific things we want to look at. Maybe we have a hypothesis that's exploring how increasing college degrees in a county impacts the community. So we'd also want to see what we know about increasing the number of college degrees in an area and what that might do. Maybe that's a theme that we want to bring out. So between your research questions and any of your hypotheses, you're going to identify all the things that you need to watch for when we start reading what other people have said about your topic. Next thing we got to do is take a trip to the library, or at least the internet. In fact, if you go to your university or college's library website, you're probably going to find a search engine where you can put in any number of themes that you've identified from this first step and see what other people have written about it. Now, if you can't get a university or college library, that's okay. You can also use Google Scholar or simply Google these ideas and see what kind of academic research is out there. Now, when you enter a topic like education in a university or college library's website and start searching for that, you're going to find hundreds of books and articles, and we need to find a way to quickly sort through these and pick the best ones for your project. So here's a couple of tips on that. First, let's focus only on journal articles. Journal articles are peer-reviewed. That means that other scholars have said this is good work, and it means that it's been published somewhere, and they're generally going to be publicly available through a library. Journal articles are 15 to 20 pages focused on a very specific aspect of a topic that you might be examining. This is compared to books, which can be 200 pages or more about a broad approach to understanding a topic. When you're an undergraduate, you don't necessarily have time to read a whole book, but you can skim and scan 15, 20 articles fairly effectively. So let's focus on journal articles. Next, let's look at journal articles that have been published in the last 5 to 10 years. This is going to give us the most modern take on what's been written. If we go back to the 1970s and 80s, there's all sorts of stuff written on poverty, but it's very outdated. Now, if you need help getting access to journal articles, you can talk to your librarian, you can talk to your professors, you can even have your library access these articles for you, but you don't want to pay for them. You want to use the resources that are available to you to get them for free. And often, you can even Google these and find them on the internet. And a professor somewhere, sometime has published them, and you can utilize that. Now, the next thing that we need to do is start identifying 15 or 20 really great articles relevant to our topic. And as you start to narrow the list down to just journal articles, you're still going to see there's probably a lot more articles than what you really need. This is where we want to find the ones that are most relevant to our paper. Remember those themes that you wrote down on a piece of scratch paper? Keep that handy as we start reading through these. Now, for each of these journal articles, I want you to start by reading their abstracts. The abstracts are going to be the first thing that you're going to see for all these journal articles, and they're 50 to 150 words. You can do that. Read that, see if it's relevant to one or more of your themes that you want to write about on your scratch paper. If the paper seems like it's useful, then that's great. Just go ahead and keep it. In fact, try to download it and save it to your computer or a USB drive. If the paper doesn't seem so useful, maybe this is a good time that we move on to a different one. And keep doing this process until you find 15 or 20 papers that cover all the themes that you need to talk about. Now, once we've identified 15, 20 articles for your paper, what we now need to do is pull these papers down so we can start working with them. The easiest thing to do is try to download them or save them on a computer or USB drive for later reference. And let's also create a little data set that lists the title of the papers, their authors, and the year they were published. We'll also add a little column in there where you can put your own notes, because that's where we're going to actually start writing our literature review. Now, what I want you to do for each of these articles is, again, go back and reread the abstract and try to write 1 or 2 sentences in this little Excel data set that we're making that talks about this article. What were the big ideas that you found from this abstract? What were the big things that the authors talked about? And if you had to explain this paper to others, what would you say about it? Write that in your little data set that you're making. Next, I want you to read the next 4 or 5 paragraphs of the paper. That's usually your introduction, give or take. Sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer. Read those. Summarize again in your little notes here things that you've learned about what these authors have said. Start thinking about those themes again, because we want to start filling in some of those blanks along the way. Now, as we write about this, try to make some very clear statements about the research. And also, let's start putting in citations. Every time we talk about someone else's research, we always want to cite it. And a citation is generally, in parentheses at the end of the sentence, the author's last names and the year their article was published. This lets other people know what article you're talking about, so they can go read that article later. We also want to cite things so that we don't accidentally plagiarize someone or steal their ideas and take credit for them as our own. Now, when we're going through and writing these cool little sentences about these papers in our little Excel file, we can start to see how our literature review is going to start being built. In fact, once you've finished these 15 or 20 articles, go through and start finding how the sentences that you've written with those little citations on at the end might fall into the particular themes that you've illustrated on your little piece of scratch paper. In fact, let's get a Word notebook or something like that that you can really make these notes and sketch these ideas out. Put your themes that you want to talk about into this word pad, and then start taking sentences that you've written with those little citations and putting them in each of the themes. Maybe, for example, the first article you read talked about how college education has a positive impact on changing poverty rates in an area. We can put that in the education section. Heck, we could even put that in the poverty section if we think it would fit there too. We could revise that sentence so it's not the same sentence, but we can put it in a couple of different places. In fact, start moving all of your sentences slowly but surely with their citations over to your literature review. Before long, these 15, 20 articles are now going to turn into paragraphs that have 5, 6 sentences apiece, and they give us a very good sense of what that theme is about. Now, our next step is to go through and read about these, speak them out loud, say them so we can start making revisions to them so they sound conversational, and we can revise this literature review down to where it reads a little bit more like a paragraph. As is, it's probably a little disjointed. So let's go through and revise things so they all seem like they talk about the same topic. And let's also make sure, too, that if we copied any sentences twice, that we change them so they aren't the same sentence twice in the same paper. Next thing let's put a topic sentence at the start of every one of these paragraphs that tells us exactly what this paragraph is going to be about. Education is an important part of understanding poverty. Paragraph 1's topic sentence. Same thing for paragraph 2. Poverty has a correlation with education. Talk about that. You can do this easily, quickly, and effectively. And in fact, at this point, you can really do this by reading only the first couple of paragraphs of a paper and also the abstract. Now, once we've sketched out some basic themes in our paper, we need to add another idea, and that's theory. Theory is an important part of sociology because it helps us understand what we see and make sense of it. Theories are proven ideas that other people have talked about in their papers, and these are big ideas. You'll often know famous theorists from your classes, and maybe even have some theories from your classes that you think might be relevant to your paper. If you have some theories in mind, that's perfect. Let's add a paragraph or two at the end talking about some major theories relevant to your paper, talk about the theorists that came up with them, make sure to cite them, and then also let's throw in some basic terminology that we might need to know regarding that theory and explain how that might predict what you expect to find in your paper's hypotheses or in your research question. Now, if you didn't find theory from your classes, you can also read through the papers. In fact, where you're going to likely find that is in their literature reviews. While you're there, maybe you see some more papers that might be a good fit for yours. But you can identify some theoretical ideas from those literature reviews and again, go through that process of adding a paragraph at the end of your literature review talking about some basic theoretical ideas. Now, at this stage, your literature review probably has 3 or 4 or even more paragraphs. And at the undergraduate level, you are good to go. There's not going to be a high expectation for a massive literature review for publishing your research. Generally, as long as you've done a good job of exploring 15 or 20 articles in those couple of paragraphs and included some kind of theoretical components, this lets the reader know what you're thinking about your topic and gives the reader everything that they're going to need to know to understand the rest of your paper. Your last step is to throw together a bibliography. Bibliographies vary by discipline, so you're going to need to figure out what your discipline uses, whether it's APA, ASA, MLA, or any of a couple other options out there. Now, I will put a link below to Purdue OWL, which is a great source for understanding how to cite things. And in fact, your bibliography is going to simply list the resources that you've cited this far in your paper, the things from your Excel data set, remember that, and then list their title. They're going to list their year they were published, their author, and where they were published. That'll give all the information that other people would need to go find those articles if they want to read them. It also lets people know, too, that you've been reading some really cool stuff and that you've got a really cool paper that's making a genuine contribution to your field. And that's it. That's the basics of the lit review. You can now go back through, read this thing, make sure it cleans up and sounds nice, but you've got everything that you need to go to start working on your next paper section. And that's going to be your method section where you explain how you're going to do that study. Now, one final quick note. As you go through different parts of your paper, always feel welcome to go back and revise previous sections so that everything lines up. Maybe when you're working on the methods, you realize there's something else that you needed to talk about in your literature review, and that's okay. This is a great time to do that because you can go back and make those changes. But that's it. You've got an undergraduate literature review written, and we're ready to move on. Now, if you have questions, you leave them in the comments below. Likewise, I would love to hear your paper topics in the comments. Leave them below so others can see them, and I'll be sure to respond to them. That's all for today, folks. Thanks for watching. Please share this on social media, and I will see you next time. Take care.